Noah went to the Kendrick Lamar concert last night. Fan by any chance?
I do like Kendrick Lamar. I've never been to a concert, but he's great at what he does. So I'm sure that was a cool night.
It was a great experience. First time seeing him in concert. Over under 5F Ben Simmons chants breaking out last night.
I imagine if you put money on the over, you would come out rather pleased.
Welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast, presented to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu Works. I'm Ben Berry. I'm small potatoes on this podcast. I'm joined by the one, the only, the great Noah Levick from NBC Sports Philadelphia, our Sixers beat writer. Noah, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, although I don't like that description of yourself. You are the podcast guru and an integral piece, as always, of Sixers Talk. But personally, I'm doing fine, and I'm glad to have the privilege of joining you here today.
You've been hanging out with Jordan Hall from our Flyers Talk podcast too much, calling me the podcast guru. But we got a lot of things we want to get into. Exciting young players in the NBA, including Tyrese Maxey. Best and worst case scenario, how Joel Embiid can improve his game. But we're going to start off with some odds, some over-under from Las Vegas, ESPN, PointsBet, and several other outlets where you can look at season projections, have the Sixers winning 50 games this upcoming season. 50 games. So the over-under 50 and a half games. Do you see the Sixers topping that?
I think if I had to make a call right now, I would go over, not by a huge margin. I think it's a good line, but I think I would go over. I think always the big question you have to ask yourself with this specific preseason Sixers over-under is just Joel Embiid's health. How many games is he reasonably going to be available for? And the last couple seasons, he's had plenty of injury scares and situations that have sidelined him. Unfortunately, COVID last season, but has been available for the large majority of the Sixers games. And when he's on the floor, this team tends to win at a really high percentage. And then I think additionally, as we've talked about a bunch, they've had a strong offseason, arguably one of the best in the NBA, I think, in terms of addressing the exact areas they needed to. I think the DeAnthony Melton trade on draft night was an excellent one. And I think also they've just overall upgraded their depth and should be a better defensive team. And then James Harden has the opportunity to rediscover some of his game and also improve his chemistry with Embiid, with Harden, et cetera. So I think there are a lot of really legitimate sources for optimism, and them cracking 50 wins, I do envision that happening as things stand. Of course, we don't even have the schedule yet. It sounds like we'll hopefully be getting that a little later this month, but over 50 wins for the Sixers, I think they're going to accomplish that. I do believe that as we sit here on August 9th.
I'm in the same boat, but it's not I'm not saying you thought it was an easy, clear cut. Yes, they'll win more than that. I think that's a good line right there, 50 and a half wins. In the Eastern Conference, you have the Celtics at 54.5, 54 and a half. You have the Bucks at 52 and a half, and the Heat are tied with the Sixers for 50 and a half. That's your odds. That's your betting line for those teams. And it's not that far-fetched that the Bucks, who won a championship last season, the Celtics, who went to the finals this previous season, to be above the Sixers. The Heat, who went a few years ago, went back to the Eastern Conference Finals. I can see why they're tied and above the Sixers. To your point, I think health will play a huge role in it. If Embiid, and we'll get into Embiid later, if he can stay above 65 games, that's great. If he can play 70 games, even better. James Harden, a full offseason here in Philadelphia, come back fully healthy. As you said, they had arguably the best offseason, addressing needs they have. They got some toughness with PJ Tucker. They got some shooters. They can space the floor out a little bit more. Tyrese Maxey's continued development. Everyone's excited about his offseason videos. So I think 50.5, I think that's a good line. I think the Sixers can be higher, and it's not that crazy to think, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, it always revolves around Joel Embiid. And then the secondary question is, okay, what is this team going to be when he's off the floor? Always an important one to consider. I have a lot of confidence in PJ Tucker's ability to play backup 5 minutes well. And I do really believe in him there, but he's 37 years old. So wouldn't shock many people if he has some unfortunate breaks with health. And it's a Danny Green-ish situation where minor injuries start popping up for him just at a greater rate. And then you also have Paul Reed, who's 23, Charles Bassey, who's 21. I like a lot of things about both those players, but I think the backup center situation for the Sixers, if you have some concerns, I totally get that. So I do think, though, they're a better team than they were last year, and that should probably translate to greater than 50 wins. That said, like, the Eastern Conference is in a really strong spot right now. I think we had an era where most of the elite teams in the NBA were in the West, and that's no longer the case. So some of these teams are going to beat up on each other a little bit. Maybe that Sixers-Bucks series ends up being split 2-2, where the Bucks take 3 of them, and it's more difficult to pile up lofty win totals as a result. But 50-plus wins for this team feels very attainable, and I think it's a nice line here.
I think, again, great line. The thing that it's not hurting the Sixers, but it's benefiting the Heat, the Bucks, and the Celtics. Their core has just been together longer, and that chemistry, getting to know each other, your teammates, that helps without a doubt. I think that's why we've seen those teams just make it a little farther in the playoffs when they've been hit with adversity. The Sixers have got some toughness. They've taken PJ Tucker, who was a key part of that Heat team, away, but the Heat still have Bam Adebayo. They still have Jimmy Butler. They still have the head coach they've had for the past decades or plus. So I think just having that integral, that core still there from the top down helps those other teams. If the Sixers stay healthy, and a key point that we haven't mentioned, the Nets being such a wild card because no one knows what their roster will look like, that could be easy 4 wins for the Sixers or any of those other teams above. Or it could be like a split series 2-2. The Nets could win 3-1. Who knows what their roster will look like?
Definitely the Kevin Durant elephant in the room deserves mention. I do think with the Sixers, they still need to build chemistry and discover exactly what is reliable for them on a night-to-night basis. But it's so valuable to have 2 elite foul drawers on your team in Joel Embiid and James Harden. Like, even with Harden last year, obviously there was the disappointing shooting dip where his 3-point numbers weren't very good, and his floaters didn't drop at a high rate either. But he gets to the foul line so much, and you look at some of these advanced efficiency numbers, because his free throw rate is so high, he's still, the 94th percentile among point guards for points per shot attempt, according to Cleaning the Glass. So you've still, even if he doesn't improve his shooting, got a really high caliber offensive player here. And I think it's not unreasonable to expect a little more comfort from Harden on the catch and shoot threes, a little better understanding of how him and Embiid can play off each other and exploit their advantages in the pick and roll, and therefore just a slightly improved James Harden across the board. So I think the Sixers should have some dependable things to call upon offensively, even if absolutely their chemistry is still a work in progress. And then just the fact that you've got some really sturdy and versatile defensive pieces here with Tucker, with Melton, with Daniel House. And I think that end of the ball should also, on most nights, be pretty good for the Sixers. So I think that just overall composition of the team increases my confidence that they shouldn't have any, long losing streaks or stretches that jeopardize their ability to pile up a lot of wins and earn a high seed in this conference.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu. Joel Embiid, how much better do you think he can get? He's already at an MVP level. He was top 3 in votes last year. A lot of people think he was robbed. How much better can he really get? I know MVP is something he wants, defensive player of the year, but his ultimate goal is a ring. Is his ceiling that much higher, or where can he improve his game?
I think he's one of those guys that you're reluctant to count out. And we mentioned it a bunch, but the context of he's only been playing basketball since he was 15 or 16 years old continues to matter. And he has this track record of major offseason improvements. I even remember last year in the game against the Cavs where he had the 40-point triple-double. In the fourth quarter, he had this kind of unbelievable move where he was in the open floor and he did this sort of live dribble pass fake before going in for, I think, an and-one layup. And I asked him about it, and he said, oh, yeah, that's a move that I picked up from Chris Paul and just added to my game. And it's a little mind-boggling that there's a 7-foot player who can just see a skill that a 6-footer has and say, oh, I want to do that. And then all of a sudden he's pulling it out in an actual game. So I don't think we want to underestimate Joel Embiid's ability to add a lot more to his bag. And I wouldn't be stunned if he does that. But you look at how much better he can get in terms of like the actual statistics on the box score, I'm not so sure. I think by and large, for him, it boils down to decision-making and efficiency in the playoffs. And of course, he had horrible luck last year with the injuries, and that was a factor in Embiid not playing as well as he wanted to against Miami. But I think if he can improve his three-point shooting a little bit, and he can have some more counters to when teams send swarms of bodies at him in the post and at the top of the key, that would be helpful. So I'm just not sure how much more he can do, though. I think he'll probably try to pull the step back off a little bit more. We even saw him from James Harden's first practice trying to imitate that specific move. And I know he will be thinking a lot about, okay, there's going to be 2 guys on me most of the time, and let's try some new counters and experiment a little to see if I can have some different solutions than teams have seen before. So I think he should still be an MVP contender, provided he's healthy, but I just don't think it's realistic to expect him to score 35 points a game on 55% shooting or something outlandish. I think he's already so great that he can't get that much better when you look at the actual box score. But can he be more entertaining and more impressive in his sheer array of moves? Yeah, I think that is probably reasonable to expect from Joel Embiid.
So I think Embiid can get a lot better, but I don't think it'll show up in the box score, as you mentioned earlier. It could be some things can improve, but I don't think that's what necessarily is going to make him a lot better. Scoring more points, great, but I'm not looking at things like that. He shot 37% from beyond the arc for the second year in a row, his highest clip since his rookie year at 36%. He's 53 and 54% overall the last 2 years. he can improve statistically, but that's not what I'm looking for. Just small things. He played 68 games last year, the most of his career. If he can get to 70 games, great. But just staying healthy more consistently. A lot of these injuries are just like freaks. So I hate to say he's injury prone or anything like that. But when the team needs you in the playoffs, things like that. And I think having James Harden, having someone else that can bear responsibility on the offensive end, and Tyrese Maxey improving, and this isn't a shot at Joel Embiid at all. It's just when you're carrying the team on offense, Joel Embiid, who can be a black hole on defense, just everything that's coming in the paint, he's negating. It's at times because he was carrying the load on offense, he just didn't have the energy on the defensive end. And we see it from time to time. So if he doesn't have to carry that load, he could just be an all-world defender all the time on defense. And maybe that can get him that Defensive Player of the Year award that he would like to capture one day. I think little things like that will help. If the team has improved, if he can trust his teammates, because I think the weakest part of Embiid's game isn't really a weakness. It's just everything else is so good, is his passing. If he becomes that much better of a playmaker, because last year he was doing it all before Harden came into town and before we just saw the rise of Tyrese Maxey, trusting his teammates, making plays out of the double teams and the triple teams. Because at that point, if he does that, he will truly be unstoppable. Before, when he wouldn't pass out of those double and triple teams, I felt like there wasn't anyone else on the court he really trusted to make a shot or take a shot outside of Seth Curry the time he was here, or the JJ Redick. So that's where I see Embiid, where he can raise his ceiling, where he can get better.
I think those are great points. I think defensively, yeah, if we're being honest, he's not always as engaged and locked in on being all world all of the time, to the potential that he has. So I think it's just asking so much of him to be monstrous on both ends of the floor. But hey, if you want to win a championship, that might ultimately be necessary for the Sixers. Again, the injuries were massive in the postseason, but there were moments where I think his defense was a little disappointing. I believe it was Game 5 of the Raptor series where Precious Achiuwa was going at him and scoring with relative ease. And Joel Embiid's better than that. We know he's so talented, so agile for his size, has great instincts as a rim protector. So maybe we can see a little more of that, just more consistently, in addition to all of the offensive brilliance. But I think your point about the passing is fair. I will, though, give him credit for continuing to make strides, reading the defense out of double teams. I thought he was a lot more self-assured and seemed to just have a better intuitive understanding of what was available and where the defense was, and when he should hit the cutter, when he should hold the ball and wait for something else to develop. Like, I think he's added a lot of nuance to his game there. But it's always been a tough balance for him between knowing he's so great as a scorer and trusting the teammates. In the Game 6 against Miami, I understand him not having a high level of trust in his teammates because no one really seemed to want the ball or to be playing with much aggression. And of course, that didn't work out for Embiid or the Sixers, that he was taking a lot of contested mid-range jump shots. And I think last year he improved his passing skill and variety a lot. We even saw him doing some Ben Simmons-ish stuff in the open floor. So now it's about knowing when that's the right move and knowing when he should rein it in a little, give the ball to a guard, and let the Sixers set up their excellent half-court offense. So there are little ways that he can fine-tune his understanding of how to be most dominant. And knowing Joel Embiid, he's thinking really closely about all those ways and is eager to implement them. And it'll be really exciting to see, whether he's able to pull all that off or show us some things that we had no idea he was capable of as well.
To piggyback on what you say, yes, Embiid's game has greatly improved the passing game, seeing cutters and things of that nature. And I think a big part of it was Ben Simmons wasn't there dominating the ball. And he was forced to not only get his own shot, create for others, and be an all-around playmaker. And if he can think, having James Harden, having Tyrese Maxey, that pressure isn't on him all the time, but if he continues to take steps, I think it'll just make him that much more unguardable and unstoppable on the offensive end. And before we move on to something else I wanted to mention, James Harden and Joel Embiid's pick and roll play was a lot better than I imagined when James Harden first got here. So I think if that continues to improve, that'll make defending both of those players even just tougher because they're already nearly unguardable players. So if their pick and roll game continues to improve, watch out.
Absolutely. I think Joel Embiid absolutely exceeded my expectations as a roller. He hadn't really been impressive there before, but I think it became obvious that a lot of that was just lack of opportunity and the Sixers not having players who could show off how dangerous he is, as a roll man. I think it was an adjustment when teams started switching that pick and roll more and showing that look to the Sixers. And I remember Embiid even acknowledging that a lot of that is just feel and intuitive understanding between himself and Harden of the best way to attack. So, theoretically, both players have a mismatch when teams switch that pick and roll, but in reality, it's not so easy, and you have to make quick decisions because help's coming from unpredictable angles. And yes, it's a switch, but it's a five-man defense that is devising, different looks after that switch that are supposed to throw you off. And I think seeing that more should, in all likelihood, benefit these very intelligent, very skilled offensive players. So absolutely, I'm excited to see that pick and roll grow as well.
One player who I mentioned that is helping Embiid, where I think his ceiling, his greatness can even go higher, is Tyrese Maxey. Bleacher Report released a list of 10 players, 2 at each position, that are among the most exciting to watch in the NBA. I give you a quick rundown for the listeners. LaMelo Ball, Darius Garland, Tyrese Maxey, Jalen Green, Anthony Edwards, Kelton Johnson, Zion Williamson, Scotty Barnes, James Wiseman. And I'm missing someone on my list because I only gave you 9. I don't know if you remember who the other person.
I think it was Alperen Şengün from Houston.
That sounds right. So I gave you that list of 10 guys, and we talked about it before the pod. I enjoy watching them play. Do you think, let's start off, Tyrese Maxey belongs on this list? And I guess what's your overall expectation from these players moving forward?
I think it's a really nice, exciting group of players. I agree with that description. I think, Maxey, of course, the hope and expectation for the Sixers is that he joins Garland in making that all-star leap this season. And I don't think that's unrealistic at all. I think it's possible. I don't think it's a lock, but I think Maxey does appear to be on that trajectory. And then there are some fascinating wild cards there, of course, with James Wiseman and whether he can remain healthy and just what he might look like in a more consistent, regular NBA setting. I think there are probably some situations where we could swap out some names. I think Ja Morant is still awfully young, and everyone would agree that he's quite an exciting young player. I also think Evan Mobley just came off an awesome rookie season, had a strong Rookie of the Year case, and it's been a long time since we've seen a player that gifted in that many areas. And I think he's got a lot of room to grow as well, and to explore exactly just which areas of his game are most effective, and yeah, so I'm really looking forward to all that. Little Sixers news tie-in. They'll be playing the Cavs twice this preseason, so we'll get to see Garland and Mobley and that young team before this year begins. But the NBA's future is indeed bright. I don't think that's an inaccurate way to spin things.
I was trying to figure out why, because once you said Ja Morant, why he wasn't on that list, but I thought maybe everyone was drafted in the past 2 years, but Darius Garland was drafted the same draft as Ja Morant. So that's an interesting omission. And you can't even say like all-stars because LaMelo Ball made an all-star, right? This past year. I'm trying to think. The Darius Garland, you said he made an all-star. Yeah. So that's an interesting omission why he isn't there. NBA, these young players, all exciting to watch. And Edwards, since he doesn't play for the Sixers, I think he should go into acting. He has a better career there. We talked about it a few podcasts ago about his work and hustle to seem natural. They're all fun to watch. If James Wiseman, if he can get healthy and just see what he could turn into, that will make Golden State even scarier. If they get a good big man like that, Zion Williamson gets healthy and the weight under control, because that seems to be the report. Even though he still got that rookie max extension, watch out, because watching him play, like, he's still a lot of fun to play when he's on the court. My takeaway from this list was Tyrese Maxey has worked hard to get to where he is, because even though he was a first-round draft pick, he wasn't like highly touted coming out of college, and he didn't have the LaMelo Ball or the Zion Williamson effect coming out of high school. And I heard of James Wiseman coming out of high school. So to me, it just shows his work ethic to get to where he is, and he'll continue to put in work to get even better. It'll be interesting to see if he can be among like the reserves for an all-star coming out of the East this year. I look forward to it. I like watching all these guys play. I keep looking back over this list. Tyrese Maxey, kudos to you, brother, for working hard to get some just recognition for everything you've done to put in it.
Yeah, he's the epitome of an exciting player. So I don't think you're going to get too many arguments from folks who are not Sixers fans. I think when you watch Tyrese Maxey play, you can't help but like him. Your eyes can't help but be drawn to him. So that's a credit to the growing legend of his work ethic, and his future continues to be really bright, I think. And cool stuff for him to be getting more of that recognition. But the spotlight will be on. So there is indeed, I think, pressure on him to continue succeeding, but I think it's unlikely he plays with any visible pressure. I mean, something that stood out to me from his first couple years in the league is multiple game sixes where he's just been incredibly confident and poised in a way that's just very atypical for a young player. And I think pressure just doesn't seem to faze him, and I doubt it will moving forward.
Nice. No, before we get out of here, what are you working on over at the website?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned last time we're doing some work on this longer film review piece on the Sixers backup center situation, some of the options they've got there, and how the team should feel about where it stands at that position. I think that's the main thing of note for us, and it is definitely a slower period in the NBA calendar, but oh, by the way, the Sixers are indeed still being investigated by the NBA, as we touched on a couple podcasts ago. So should any developments happen there, we will be all over it.
Nice. Well, he's Noah Levick. Check out his work at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Follow on Twitter at Noah Levick. For our listeners, thanks for listening. People that watch on YouTube, subscribe to NBC Sports Philadelphia. Leave a comment. Noah be in the comments sometimes. I do too. I see all the love and the hate you guys leave. We'll be back next week with a new podcast. This was the Sixers Talk podcast presented to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works.